Day 329, November 25th. God is love. 12. The aseity of God. 1 John 4 verses 7 to 8. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and every one that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. 1 John 4 verses 7 to 8. When we speak of the aseity of God, or how God is a esse, we are discussing his self-existence, independence, and self-sufficiency. Throughout the Bible, God describes his existence as one that is underived. He makes it clear that he has no needs, and he reveals that he is independent. He is not subject to or dependent upon any external constraints. First, let's turn our attention to the matter of God's self-existence. In the early chapters of Genesis, we read the fascinating account of the creation. We learn how God created great whales, or sea creatures, and every winged fowl after his kind, Genesis 1 verse 21. He made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, Genesis 1 verse 25. Lastly, the Bible tells us that God created man in his own image, Genesis 1 verse 27. God created every living thing by speaking each one into existence. Consequently, the lives of all created things are derived. None of them, not the land animals, the sea animals, the birds, mankind, or even the angels, created themselves. Their lives were created by, or, in other words, derived from, God. Unlike the life of all created beings, God's life is underived. He is the uncreated creator, the life from which all forms of life came into existence. He has no need of a beginning or an end because he is the author of time and is not subject to it. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says that the Father hath life in himself, John 5 verse 26. Nothing created him and nothing outside himself sustains his eternal existence. Not only can all living things trace their existence to him, they are also entirely reliant upon him for the sustainment of their lives. More than that, the existence of the entire universe is completely dependent upon him. The Bible says that he is upholding all things by the word of his power, Hebrews 1 verse 3. God is upholding all things, but, being an esse God, nothing is upholding him. In other words, he is completely independent. God is not only independent with regard to his existence, but in every possible way. He never lacks anything, needs anything, or is subject to or hindered by anything external to himself. Thus, we read that our God is in the heavens, he hath done whatsoever he hath pleased. Psalms 115 verse 3. Again, in the book of Daniel, he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand, or say unto him, What doest thou? Daniel 4 verse 35. This quality, namely the fact that God acts without any external constraint, is often referred to as the freedom of God, but, as our discussion shows, God's freedom is directly tied, and for our purposes, falls under, his aseity. God doesn't need to use any means outside himself at all. He proved this at the beginning of creation, when he created the entire universe out of nothing. In the same way, God is never dependent on any means to accomplish his will. He often chooses to use means, but we should not suppose that he needs to. Now, we will learn of how God is completely self-sufficient. It is sometimes implied that God created the universe to fulfill something which he was deficient in or lacked, but the truth is that he was perfectly fulfilled before creation. The three persons of the Trinity were in wonderful loving fellowship with one another, and had no need for further fulfillment or purpose. Nothing was lacking. Contrary to the teachings of many, God did not create man because he needed a friend. The Bible makes it clear that God is entirely void of any need. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life, and breath, and all things, Acts 17 verses 24 to 25. As these verses show, God never needed us to exist. He never had any need for us to worship him. He never had any need for companionship. This is not to portray God as indifferent to man, for we know that he created mankind for his good pleasure and that he delights in having a relationship with us. Rather, it is to guard us against self-exaltation, foolishly supposing that God must obtain his sufficiency or fulfillment in a relationship with us. That is simply not the case. In fact, God would be just fine by himself for all of eternity, enjoying the perfect fellowship of the Trinity. Every one of God's attributes is a se, meaning of himself. God doesn't need to go looking for more power to sustain the universe. He is omnipotent in himself. He is a completely self-sufficient source of infinite power. Similarly, God has no need to acquire knowledge outside of himself. His omniscience is also a se, who hath directed the Spirit of the Lord, or being his counselor hath taught him. With whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, and taught him in the path of judgment, and taught him knowledge, and shewed to him the way of understanding. Isaiah 40 verses 13 to 14. Consider that, if God ever had need of anything, he could no longer be God, for a God who lacks cannot simultaneously be the creator of all things. Created things have needs. God is never in need, but rather is the one who meets all needs. God, by virtue of being God, never lacks anything. Some people have claimed that God's lack of imperfection is somehow an imperfection in itself. According to this line of thinking, there is a kind of beauty found in imperfection. But it doesn't take much to see that this notion is as self-contradictory as it is blasphemous. Perfection cannot be imperfection. We need to understand the aseity of God because of our tendency to become high-minded. Over time, we begin to suppose that God needs us. Maybe we hold an important position in the church. Maybe we have a rare ability or spiritual gift. Maybe we have resources that no one else has. It is the nature of the sinful flesh to become prideful. We might not say it, but somewhere in the back of our minds, we begin to deceive ourselves, supposing that God needs us. But the Bible is clear, God doesn't need us at all. Rather, God chooses to use us in spite of our unworthiness. Furthermore, if we do anything that is truly a service to the Lord, it is only because he accomplished it through us. So then, let's not twist things, thinking too highly of ourselves. There is nothing that we can ever add to God. If he wanted to, he could save the entire world without working through us at all. He has no need for us in the completion of his will, and he has no need for us to be fulfilled in himself. He is not dependent on us in any way, shape, or form, but it is us who are entirely dependent upon him. There is nothing that we can do for God that he can't do without us. More than that, there is nothing that we can do without him. Remember the words of Jesus, "Without me ye can do nothing." John 15 verse 5. There is nothing that we can tell God that he doesn't already know. God doesn't need to work in the manner that we think he should, and that is because he is not subject to the limitations that we are subject to. He is self-existent, self-sufficient, and independent, but our life is only in him, our sufficiency is only in him, and we are entirely dependent on him.